Hello and welcome back to the Rise to Her podcast. I am really stoked for today's conversations. We are going to break down why systems and structures are thriving right now, the term witch, how it has been used to control, and how we can start to trust ourselves, tap more into our magic, and truly allow ourselves to build a reality that we enjoy. A lot of us are existing in a parallel reality that is full of suffering, that is full of pain. And today in the conversation with Barbara, we're going to break down how to say enough is enough. Also, that is the name of her badass book, which you will learn more about in the episode, and how to follow those small no's that lead to the big no's of I can't do this anymore, and then follow through. We're going to talk about trusting your intuition. We're going to talk about the patriarchy. We're going to talk about being manipulated inside of systems that were meant to keep us down. And we're just going to be really real together. So today's episode is super special, and I'm excited to share it with you. Barbara Burgess, who is joining us today, is an author, a mother, executive, and unapologetic dark chocolate lover who says she loves to embrace the messiness of life. She founded Corluma, core meaning heart, Luma meaning light, and it is a Chicago-based consulting firm. And she has wrote and performed a one-woman show called The Extraordinary Experience of Being Ordinary. And she most recently wrote her very first book, Enough: Finding Peace in a World of Distractions, Hustle, and Expectations. Barbara is known for her humor, her vulnerability, and practical wisdom. She shares really simple shifts inside of this podcast to help you remember that you're enough, you have enough. And she likes to say her ego is being kept in check by 2 teenage children and a career adventure that includes selling candy bars for Nestle Foods, launching Granger into internet commerce, and a brief marketing stint at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And most recently, overseeing operations, marketing, and finances as the COO of a nonprofit. But like all of us, Barbara says she's still figuring it out. And we're going to talk about how we figured it out, how we're still figuring it out. And I can guarantee that you are going to leave today's conversation feeling inspired, feeling ready to let the systems fall, and like you have a path to do that. If you're listening on YouTube, you see I forgot to put my background up, so you're getting to see the inside look at my guest room, and my golden retriever is absolutely snoozing right now, and she's got all of her toys. My pit bull's back there too, but I thought it was pretty cute. You can see I'm pointing right here. I have pictures of them all over this room because it's really special, and that's just an inside look of my life, and totally forgot to put this up, but I needed to record. So let's get into today's episode, and it's going to be a good one. All right. Barbara Burgess, welcome to the Rise to Her podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, same. So Barbara and I connected at the beginning of April, and I feel like we immediately synced on everything that we believe and teach. And so I'm really stoked to have you on the podcast. And I know all of our listeners are going to really dramatically benefit from your expertise and your wisdom. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you teach, I want to take us back to who you were before you got to where you're at right now. So when we say that, you've worked with executives, you've built like a high level career, and you lived inside of what I think everyone would classify as a high performance environment. And so I'm curious, at what point did you start realizing that version of success wasn't working for you and what you wanted to create?
Yeah, I think there were markers along the way. This is what I think so interesting about how we hold on to frameworks and paradigms of things. I laugh at myself. I hang on tighter than I would think. So if I go way back, I think there were signs early in my career that I think there are better options for you, right? But from a job perspective, it was like the age that I am. And when I graduated, it was like, just get the best job you can with the best name, right? So that it just started my feet on this little train track or moving sidewalk where you're just going and going. But I think to your point, what really the beginning of this big transition to where I am now was back 4 or 5 years ago. And it was interesting because it was really realizing that a lot of the things that I had problems with in the system I was in, that I was trying to change, it was this almost felt sensation of, okay, I'm hitting my head against the brick wall for the third time. Not the first, not the second. I'm apparently stubborn, but the third time. And the brick wall is not going anywhere. And I think that's a huge thing that I feel like since then has almost been on accelerated learning for me. I'm somebody who just at a very pure sense, little kid sense, like, I don't understand why we all can't get along and love each other. And there's plenty of food and plenty of everything. There's just this little sense of like, it's really easy in my mind. And so I get cranky, frustrated, confused when we treat each other badly. We don't act that way, et cetera. And so I think almost an addiction for me is to happen. Well, I'll solve this. I think I could fix this. What if I do this? What if and I remember sitting in the coffee shop it was December 31st. And I was just trying to clear my calendar, look ahead, et cetera. And I pulled up my calendar and was looking at the events that were coming up. I was looking out by a quarter, right? For some reason, we had these big events happening in January, but my mind skipped that. It skipped February. It went to this March event. And it was almost like I kind of wormholed into being there. And I saw this, it was a weekend training. I saw it on my calendar and my whole body just gave me the capital N-O, no. It was literally like one of those, no, you're not, we're not, that kind of moment. And so what's fascinating is like at that point in time, I had no plan that I was going to do any transition, but I am a strong believer in like, when you get guidance like that, you got to pay attention. So I remember coming home and saying to my husband at the time, said, hey, I've been at my job for 22 years. And I remember saying to him, hey, I'm going to quit my job. And he just looked at me. He's an engineer, so his mind was like moving in slow-mo, whatever. But he was like, okay, then. And so I just knew at that point. But I think it was that sense. I really unpacked it afterward. Once I had that big no experience spiritually, I was like, okay, what about this? I started arguing with myself in that coffee shop, like, wait, what do you mean? Why would we do that? Da, 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 da. And I kind of ended up breaking it down into these buckets. But the pure one at the top was kind of that. There were other lifestyle things. My buckets were, okay, these things I've been trying to change aren't changing. And there's nothing that I can do or will do that will change them. There was also just this felt sensation of the life and lifestyle I had built that there's no room for any peace, any moment, any breath, anything. And at the time, my kids were a little bit younger, and I was like, I don't want to miss this transition. They were moving into teen tweens or, into teenager years. And I thought you only get little cracks. And so it was these three things that really caused the beginning of the end that was like a handful of years ago. I say the beginning of the end, it's the beginning of the next season.
So you said when you started sharing that, things that you were hitting your head against the brick wall for the third time, and you got to the point where you walked in and told your husband, I can't do this, I have to quit my job. There were several things that you really wanted to prioritize in your life that you couldn't do with where you currently were living. Can you take me back to maybe the second time you were hitting your head against the brick wall? What were the other things, like maybe smaller things, that led up to that big no? You said that big no, that felt sensation of absolutely not, I've got to go, that breaking point. What was like the small things in the daily life that you were experiencing that led up to that?
Yeah, I think there were things that just my organization was doing, that my president and CEO were doing, that were not in alignment with my values. So although that sounds big, it's really in 1,000 small ways, right? Mm-hmm. It's sitting in a meeting, watching them be fake to someone and then talking about them behind their back. One of them was borderline verbally abusive and just narcissist, the stereotypical narcissist, watching that stuff. And it's a weird thing where like your system can get accustomed to bad. But I think I started having more of an awakening, insight, understanding for possibilities really back to the pandemic. That was a big turning point. And I think I was jealous of all the people home baking bread and stuck all day doing these things because my company was all in person and I was COO at the time. So it was like we had to take it overnight online. Mm. And so it was exhausting. It was just exhausting. And then I had 2 kids who all of a sudden had to be on online school, kids that we didn't let them have online access before, and all the crap that we ran into related to that. So there was a lot of pressure in that moment, but there was a lot of awakening too. It's like, I woke up to my own racism at that moment, just my own unconscious biases on things. There was a lot of work all happening at the same time. And I think it's because many of us in the world, got forced, depending where you live, to stop and do different things. In some places, there was no stop. But for me, I think that was like, there were these little things all the way along that built up to that. But it was all of a sudden I had new eyes to see stuff that was normal in my day to day that I was like, wait, that's not good. And that's not good. And that's not good. And that's actually horrible. And that, like, it's like when you buy a red car and you can't help but see red cars. It's like all of a sudden now that new almost energetic imprint was in my mind, that awareness. I couldn't unsee things I had bypassed or were invisible to me before. And I think about this related to food because I'm somebody that's always had a challenge with a relationship with food that's different lately. But I remember like when I stopped eating at McDonald's, they became non-existent to me. It's not before that I knew exactly where they were and how close, and that like my personality would be like, I can find that one. But when I stopped eating there, it was almost like they disappeared, like they didn't exist in my visual reality anymore. And so there's that interplay, right? The things, as to me, my paradigm, my worldview, my energy shifted. Some things disappeared, other things became so blaringly obvious. But I think to your point, it wasn't one big horrible thing. It was a lot of little things over that period of time. From that moment, probably for the next couple of years, it was like watching these little things. So, and there were plenty of milestone moments of bigger stuff where I made a stand for something and it was like, nope.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial for us to teach people, especially women or people that have traditionally been marginalized, to trust themselves, to start to be able to pick up on those nuances. Because what you said was this compounding effect of, I'm showing you where things are out of alignment. When I say I, spirit, universe, God, right?
Yeah.
I'm showing you where there are things that are not meant for the life, the contract that you have.
Yeah.
And they're going to continue to build until there's a breaking point in where you say enough is enough, that big no comes through.
Yeah.
And what I've seen, especially working with really high level entrepreneurs, creators, leaders, and women, is this internalized mistrust of self.
Yeah.
I must continue to go or else all will fall away, right? And it's that really deep need to feel safe, to produce, to have the income, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to stay in whatever power we feel like we have, because we have been conditioned to mistrust that own internal power. Did you ever experience this mistrust of self, or even asking like, oh, am I making this up? Almost like a gaslighting?
Oh, 1,000 ways. Really, it's like literally, how do I count them? How do how do I document all of them? I want to go back to what you said for a moment, because I was just talking to my girlfriend about exactly what you said earlier this week. We were talking about at this company a training that we had both attended that was supposed to be a women's leadership training, but we were unpacking it in our minds. And what we really realized is what that training was teaching us was to not trust ourselves. So this thing under the guise of women's leadership, women's empowerment, really was teaching me to ignore what my body knew and then pick something that better fit for society's comfort. And oh, by the way, when I look back at that, everything that supposedly we were learning, we didn't need to learn, the men needed to learn. We had this deep inset wisdom of what worked and didn't work for us. But what we were being taught is, well, in this world, this is what you got to do kind of thing, right? And I think that, by the way, is still massively prevalent right now. And I know you know it because of the people that you work with. And so I've had a load of experience of gaslighting. I mean, even with that narcissistic CEO, I had to begin, after our meetings, sending myself and him an email of what we talked about, because literally in the next meeting, it'd be like, I never said that. I mean, it would be that blatant. Not everybody has those blatant ones. And I'll just say for my own self, and I think this is true for a lot of women, like, I have early trauma. So this is familiar, that discounting, the leaving my body is so familiar that even if it's bad, it's familiar, right? And I think this is the thing that I'm in a season of life moving into another version of this right now, where it's like trying to invite myself into something like the idea of even safe is still foreign to me.
Yeah.
I'm aware that I need it like water. I'm aware it's so core, but I'm aware I'm not there yet. I have had little experiences of it. So I have some kind of like, almost like a touch point, right? But because I think unconsciously, I put myself into situations that were familiar over time, which meant not good. right? And that's a whole series and pattern, right? And so I want to say something else about the body piece. So I teach an emotional intelligence class, and I just taught it about 3 or 4 weeks ago, 2 full days with people teaching about this. But the part I love teaching the most, because I believe I'm always teaching myself, it's just other people get to be there, because I think that is how spirit and God moves, right? Like, we teach the things we need to learn. And so part of what I was talking with them about is exactly this, right? Like, we have this massive GPS right here, this physical GPS, God-given, that tells us so much information. Yet we are conditioned in our society to ignore it, dismiss it, minimize it, belittle it, shame it, fill in all the blanks, right? And so even for me, like, I was giving examples in the class that were present in the moment to really notice the feelings in the body, notice the sensations, notice whatever those things are. But I have personally gaslit myself, in addition to being gaslit by loads of people. I'm in a particular issue with a friend right now that's happening, and, like, it's still prevalent. But learning to get back in my body, like, I'd pick a theme or two for each year. And my 2 themes this year, the first one is embodied, and the second one is wilding. And the embodied really is to do what you facilitate women to do. It's like, this thing does know, let's get back in it, because that's what spirit coded so beautifully with all this energetic data. And so let's stay in there. Like, I get every now and then I'll get triggered and pop out of it. Okay, but let's come back, right? And then the wilding part is really about whatever frameworks I've been taught, like, screw them. No, that is data. Those are data. That is knowledge. That's not wisdom. The wisdom is internal. The wisdom of that little girl who believes that, she's right. That is easy to solve. We don't have to be killing ourselves in our world. That is not naive. It's just rational and makes sense. It's wise, right? It's just that's not what's going on out here that I can see. And when the majority of what you see is that, and again, I think media just perpetuates this, it's easy to self-deny.
Absolutely.
It's easy just to suck it up or whatever. But yeah, loads of gaslighting, loads and loads.
Yeah, I think it's helpful too with looking at the system, looking at the structure that designed the paradigm in which we live that leads us to gaslight. And thank you for sharing that story and that truth, because when we look at those of us who are running businesses, who are leading these externally successful lives, other people can assume, well, they must just feel so trustworthy of themselves. They just must feel like they've got it together. But when we look at it, this conditioned paradigm of mistrust goes back centuries.
Yeah.
Because a woman in her power was known as a witch.
Right.
And that's why I've chosen to reclaim the term witch. And I read energetic patterns, and I'm a scientist. I'm trained as a health behavior scientist to understand decision making, to understand what drives someone to continue and perpetuate a pattern. And so I offer this to our listeners to remind them that we are deconditioning generations of it's not safe to be in your power.
Well, even to your point, the word hag, right? We use hag as a horrible thing in the movie. The hag is the ugly old villain. It means wise woman.
Yeah.
So yes, for forever, right? And those are, to your point, the images we grow up with, what we see in the fairy tales and the movies and all those things. Everything around us is meant to reinforce that, to keep us out of our power. And I think that's the wilding part for me this year is screw that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, screw that. Let the systems and the structures burn and fall. And let's talk a little bit more about that, because most folks that are listening to this, they're either building a business, they're in a business, or they're in a high level. Maybe they're running a company. Maybe they have a desire to run a company. Or for me, I'm still in clinical research and I have a large team that reports to me. And being in academia, especially, is a really fascinating place to navigate as a woman, as a queer woman, as a queer woman with facial piercings, and I have a half sleeve of tattoos. And so it's deciding what is true and authentic to me.
Yeah.
How do I play the game?
Yep.
And how do I play a game that doesn't require me to abandon what is true for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I will talk to a lot of folks as they're starting their businesses, as they're recognizing that the way that they built their business isn't going to be sustainable, because what they really want is to spend time with their family, is to travel, all of those things. And so, I like to remind that we have to have a structure, an ability to work really hard so that it can hold us in the times that we are in flow, in the times that we want to just receive, right? And so there is a balancing of, when do I play? When do I rest? And what structure do I have to hold that? So I want to talk about, how do we start to navigate playing the game and honoring our truth? Because I personally don't believe that those are mutually exclusive. I believe there's a beautiful duality that leads into a oneness, that we can do both. So what's your perspective on that, as someone that's been, a COO, you've run nonprofits, you are working in corporations in corporate America? What is your perspective?
Well, first of all, I want to say, amen. Amen all day long. Because I feel like for the executive coaching I do, really, that's the space I just hold for people, is what you just described, right? Because what I learned from being in those environments is what those constructs will look like, feel like, how they really operate. And I refuse to pretend they operate any other way than they do. I don't care what values you have on your wall. I'm uninterested. What are people doing? What are the actions they're doing? Tells you everything you need to know about the structure you're in, right? And I believe, being beings who wish to contribute and be bright lights and all that kind of stuff, we get to do that, but we need to know where we are, right? And so even concrete skills that I work with, particularly women executives, on staying in your energy lane. And so part of that is just really to your point of, okay, where is that internal locus of control? What matters to me, et cetera? And not to be tempted outside of it. There's so many ways to tempt us outside, whether it's somebody making a criticism or having a judgment or us comparing ourselves to somebody else, right? That's inviting us outside of our energy lane. It's a distraction, but we can spend our whole lives over there defending, convincing, educating, et cetera. No, they get to decide that. I get to stay here. My job is not to be a better Christina or Matt or Michael. My job is to be the best me, whatever that looks like for me. So like that conceptually, but holding those both ands, because again, I love spirit, but I'm really practical. I'm just a super practical person. So if, let's say, there's a woman executive and she's going into a meeting, right, and felt kind of like she felt this political stuff going on, we map it. Okay, who are the players? What are their intents? Not unlike the probably clinical research you do. What's their motivation? What's the danger spots here? It's all that kind of stuff. Now, how do you say what you need to say? What are they likely to say? And then what are some responses? I call them pocket phrases. What's a pocket phrase you could pull out so you don't have to think about it, that is authentic to you, but still doesn't allow you to be prey or victim to what's happening? It gets that specific, right? Because again, to your point, I think we need to know where we are, because if we hold this naive optimism, well, they'll just treat me well because that's how I would do it. No. Even when I was teaching emotional intelligence a couple of weeks ago, we had a lot of women of color in the room. And I said, I'm not going to pretend that it's the same. The expectations for those women are not the same for me as a white woman, which are not the same as the guy sitting next to me. The expectations for emotions in a workplace are varied because of our biases and things like that. So I'm not going to sit there and teach it and pretend everybody in the room has the same challenge. That would be kind of a lie. So instead, I'm like, no, if you sense a no, that is true. So the only question is then, how do you respond? Right? And that's what we do strategies on. What would feel authentic to me without putting myself in a crosshairs of somebody, right? And to me, that usually comes from really good skills about open inquiry. You have to be so present to yourself to be able to put things back. So, if you just said something that was quite insulting to me in this interchange, then for me to be able to, instead of defending and saying, I did not do that, and putting that energy back, to go into that inquiry and say, Emily, can you help me understand, how did you come to characterize this thing? So I still look like I am calm. I can feel rage on the inside because they just did something that deserves that, but that is different from how my response is going to be. And so a lot of what we work on is that creating space between that stimulus. In the stimulus and reaction, there's no space. We move it apart so there can be a response. And there can be a whole universe of stuff that happens in there. And I think part of what we learn as high achieving women is in that in-between space, which could be a micro moment, can I find myself? Can I place myself? And then can I be aware of where I'm at? And sometimes that means honestly just saying something to get you out of this situation so you can go be with yourself, and then close the eyes and meditate or energy cleanse or do whatever you need to do to find yourself again, right? But I think you're absolutely right. It is both. Again, to your point, I work in traditional corporate settings online with people all day, every day. I'm just aware of who I am in those settings. I'm still just a little energetic being that cares and loves and stuff. That's why I do what I do, but I don't need to say those words to them. I just need to know that in my heart, and that's what I bring.
Yes, yes. And it's fascinating. Oh my God, there's so much I want to unpack in that. So I'm going to try to trace it back a little bit. And I want to start to speak about privilege here. And you were talking about in your emotional intelligence class and speaking to the fact that women of color are expected to act different unconsciously most of the time, I would hope. But there's obviously a lot of very blatant bias that is still very present. And so I want to speak to the idea of privilege, and especially those of us that find ourselves in the spiritual space. We want to abandon the 3D reality that we live in order to feel love, light, whatever it may be. But when we do that and we ignore what the current 3D reality is, I believe, and I'm curious your perspective on this too, that we are abandoning a core lesson that our soul came to learn, because why else would we come to be a human in this 3D reality if we choose to not participate in it? And there will be some people that will say, Emily, corporate America or working and running a business, that is just not for me. I want to be out in the woods. I want to just completely disconnect. And I would say if that is your truth, beautiful. But we're talking to the folks that have a vision of a more well world. And in that, it is doing things differently. It is holding space for the helpers, the healers, the leaders, and redesigning a structure and a system that is supportive of the whole human. But until we're there, we have to recognize our privilege or lack thereof and know when it is safe to say certain things, to be that version of self, and when it is appropriate or not safe to share something about ourselves, right?
Yep.
Vulnerability doesn't mean I'm just going to give it all to you, right? That would be maybe trauma dumping in a way.
Yeah.
And so how do you navigate that?
Well, and I think I just love what you said. Gosh, so much in there to back up to the being aware in that space of myself and reserving the right to be protective, to be conscious. Situational awareness is a competency for executives. We're just talking about it as a much deeper level. So when I'm being situationally aware, then it's not just like I need to be aware of others' biases in addition to my own. And to that point about privilege, that is where I don't resonate as much with certain folks on journeys, not because to your point, I think it's wrong. It's just not my journey in this lifetime. So I've been on, I think I said to you before, I've been on a lot of spiritual pilgrimages. And one of the things that always struck me, because I've met healers and spiritual leaders all over the world, Tibet and China and Morocco and blah, 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 blah. And there are individuals for whom their calling is to be the monk meditating in the cave, for sure. And I respect that because I believe energetically they're helping me. I believe they're sending out energy into the planet that I am benefiting from, right? But I'm a householder. And a householder is someone who is living in this world, but I don't abandon my spiritual perspective because of it, but I'm well aware that's what I picked, right? And I think to your point, we need to be clear and tune in with ourselves. If you're literally meant to be one of those that's disconnected from society, amen, high tens, all that. But I think it can get very confusing because the term spiritual bypassing is real, right? I'm going to get out of my emotional pain and discomfort of dealing with all of these humans and my own imperfections and my own dark side to say I'm going to levitate above all of it, right? And by the way, I'm going to go back to the witch thing for a moment. I think that's disempowering. There is a patriarchal lens on as if going up is better.
Yes.
And I think from a feminine perspective, I'm going down. I just want to cry, like I'm planting my roots. I'm getting back in my body. I'm going to where my wisdom is. And so I think even the aspirations in the spiritual community can become very twisted and distorted. And it becomes this like, can I escape myself, right? And again, we're seeing right now a lot of these guru spiritual leaders falling. Well, hello. Yeah, that was never the structure that made sense. We just haven't had around us these other structures. And so for me, going deeply inside, existing in my body, existing in the world is where I'm exploring and playing with heaven existing, right? But I love the phrase that you said, and I just want to hold it for myself, that deconstructing, there's so much, I underestimated the unlearning because I'm still in it. And I'm 5 years in, and I'm pretty rigorous about my own responsibility in things. And I said this to my friend this week. I said, I can't believe I keep getting surprised. And I will say surprised because all of a sudden somebody will act away or something will happen in my life, et cetera. And I'm like, what? I didn't realize it. It's like the layer of the onion. The next one comes off. But I feel like that's the unlearning in order to get back to that wisdom. But the wisdom is not escape, right? I would say I'm probably in one of the most raw phases I've ever been in my whole life, emotionally. I'm like, I used to drink, I don't drink. I moved to food addiction, I don't do that anymore. And so all of my own feelings that I was bypassing, I can no longer do. That divine intelligence running through my system trying to communicate. So I'm uncomfortable. Even as we sit, I can feel my body, right? But I choose to be in it because that getting out of it, whether it's through addictions or spiritual bypassing, it's not the soul code I came here to activate. But it is a constant, really pragmatic, day-by-day thing to keep getting back in it, getting back in it, getting back in it.
Right. If you've been listening to this podcast and thinking, this is exactly how I want to run my business, that is your sign to go deeper. Rooted is my monthly membership for entrepreneurs and leaders who are done running their business and their career on empty. Inside, we work with energetic patterns of each season, pull the archetypes, read what's moving, and use all of it to make clearer decisions, reduce the stress that's been quietly draining you, and build towards your vision in a way that actually feels like you and feels deeply connected to source and spirit. Most of us have spent years mastering the strategy and performing really high. The plans, the goals, the hustle. Rooted is the other half. It is the part that makes the strategy work without costing you everything. It's $27 a month and you can try it free for 7 days. Go to risetoher.com/rooted or click the link in the show notes. Come get rooted with us. I'll see you inside. The unlearning and relearning what is true for you 1,000% And I heard something on a podcast the other day. I literally had to stop it because I was like, I can't listen to this. But they were speaking about when you do this work, eventually you will not see suffering anymore. And I said, okay, well, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Because when we do that, we are, again, ignoring the human form. And when we turn a blind eye to suffering, we are doing the very thing that is against our true human nature, which is to respond to suffering, to protest, if that is what you were called to do, to hold space for your teams. One thing that I hold very near and dear as I run my team, and I have like 20 plus people that I help run a team with, is honoring who they are as a human form first before their work. However, I hold the expectation that they must honor it too.
Yeah.
If they aren't coming to me and saying, hey, this is present, this is what's going on, I can't honor that for you either.
Yeah.
So
Beautifully said. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. Yeah.
1,000%. And I offer that on the back end of this teacher saying you will no longer see that. And that is just a full stop. No, that is not what we're here to do in this human form.
Yeah.
Yes, we are fully divine and we are fully human. And I say that all the time. But this inability to be with the suffering, I think, is perpetuating our own suffering and thinking that we're wrong or that something is that we caused ourselves this pain, when there's a surrendering that could happen to that.
Yeah.
And saying, oh, this is part of the full spectrum of the human form, of being able to feel the depths of my pain, of my sorrow, of my grief. And that is what then allows me to access the tops of my joy, my ecstasy, but it is full divine opening when we allow ourselves to be the full human, right? Because when we block off one, we block off the other.
Yeah.
And that causes and perpetuates our own suffering, our own sorrow of, oh, I need to have all of this money. I need to have this company. I need to have this business so that I can be this thing. Well, if that's what we're focusing on, we're going to perpetuate our own suffering.
Right. And just to what you said, because you said it before and you kind of reiterated again here, but I want to go back to it. Like, I fully believe, like, I came to choose to be a human.
Yeah.
Right. So if that's the case, and I have this little video I play in my mind about, if there's such a thing as a God as an entity, versus just, radiating energy, that they would ask me at the end of my days, like, how'd it go? What'd you think? Right. And so, because again, understanding if I pick this experience, it's not about good, bad, right, wrong judgment going here or there, but like, okay, you chose to go have this experience, how did that go for you? And so to that point, if I were to bypass it, it would have kind of been a wasted reality, because wait, I missed like all the stuff I came to do, I didn't do. Instead, I tried to get back to that other reality where is non-human, right? Where it's more spiritual, energetic, et cetera, because I do believe they're all existing parallel. So it just doesn't even make sense almost from that point. But I was thinking, I've got my little Kuan Yin here, and I have little tokens and things around my desk, but her description is she who hears the cries of the world. And what I love about it, when that sort of image that as a kind of being to think about came into my experience, like, I'm very sensitive. If my daughter's upset about something, I'm upset about something. Like, I will cry at any movie and any commercial and any whatever. And I don't make any apologies about it. No, I'm like just very sensitive. And also, by the way, if I'm mad, equally, I will be enraged, right? There's a big ocean flowing in here with huge waves. We're not like, beep, 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 beep. But what I think about her is, it is that holding space, like she's often seen with this vessel, but it's supposed to be like the tears, right? But it's not going away. It is being present with. And that's the piece that is so profound to me, because you can look at her sort of soft compared to a collie or something like that, right? But I think there's nothing soft about that. And I was just, again, in the teaching of this place of saying how being present to the suffering, to the pain, to the emotions, to the whatever, it is the most courageous thing we do.
Yes.
And we act like the other physical stuff is harder. Are you freaking kidding me? No, just for me to be with the energy that is this emotional field, spiritual field, energetic field, that takes a lot. So sometimes it takes more energy to be quiet. And this goes to the other thing that I teach often. I call it bulletproof grace. And it's particularly for women executives. I think I've taught it to one guy. But the whole idea is, and I'm going back to your executives in the room, you're sitting in a meeting and somebody does something that's really harmful coming right at you, right? And I imagine that I have on this gorgeous chest armor, because it's got to be cute too, right? It's just form-fitting. It's not guy's armor, right? It just all that kind of stuff. But it's bulletproof. And it's like night time, almost. And so the bullet comes and I want to have enough armor. I'm aware of where I am. I'm aware that happened, that it bounces off, right? So it's bulletproof. But the grace coexists with it. So the bulletproof grace is, I can still, even though they just shot me, I can still respond with full-on intention, presence, calculation, all the kinds of things. Again, I don't want to lose my power. And I'll go back to my experience with this narcissist. He said to me once, we had gotten in a huge yelling fight. And I was not somebody that would ever scream, yell in a work setting, et cetera, but he loved it. And so when I had gotten to this point, the way it got characterized is as if I had gained my assertiveness. Now I was somebody who could be present. And so if we got in a fight, I felt terrible afterward. He felt great, because you can imagine the energetic exchange that's happening there, right? And it was a great coach that I was working with at the time who said, he's like, you understand you don't have to do that, right? And I'm like, no, what do you mean? I get praised for this at work. This is assertion. This is the patriarchy. This is men in work, blah, blah, blah. He's no, you just don't have to. And oh my gosh, that period of time where I started not to, where I just chose, they can yell all they want and I don't have to join that whatsoever. And I could say something. Now, here's the grace part. What, this isn't working for me right now. We'd be on Zoom. This isn't working for me right now. I'm going to hang up. If there's a point at which you feel, you're more gathered and professional, I'm happy to talk. That's that withdrawal kind of, so it's bulletproof. Like I see it, but I don't need to join in. And it's grace with myself and my choices and what works for me and all those kinds of things. But it's probably one of the most common things I've needed to use navigating in this world where we all are just human and doing stupid stuff.
Yeah. Human to human, and we really act human.
Yeah, we do.
I say that. I was talking to my wife and I was feeling so emotional. And we, as women, we typically have been conditioned to use the word like, oh, I feel crazy.
Yes.
It's in that conditioned response of if we feel a lot, oh, that must mean we're hysterical, crazy, or whatever. And I've just started to say, I am feeling so human today.
I love that.
I feel everything, and there's a chance that I'm going to absolutely break down. And she goes, okay, break down. And when we go to CrossFit, if I have a really hard workout, I'm like, I'm probably going to cry. She's like, okay, that's your energy being released and being held and given permission to
priceless.
Oh my God. Right. And her and I are both in these very masculine roles of leading. She's a director of a clinic. She's a physical therapist, and she's leading this entire clinic of staff and has this huge caseload. And I'm leading a business and multi-million-dollar research projects and have staff that report to me. And so being held in this space of you can just be fully human, you can rest, you can receive. I mean, there is not many things like it. And it's why I have Rooted. I think I've spoken to you about that, which is my membership where I work with leaders, creatives, entrepreneurs to teach them energetic mastery so that they can continue to show up in their fields. They can reduce their stress, tap into more joy, and learn to work with the energetic cycles. We're going into Beltane right now, if you look at the Wheel of the Year, and that is creative fertility. That is being in the abundance of what is available to you. And I think we can only tap into that when we release the energetic density and heaviness and I should be's and I need to be's, just like you had with this narcissist who was trying to get you to fight. I need to be this to perform in this high level masculine patriarchy, right? And when you were simply given permission to just not be it, you could put it down. And I can just imagine the that came from that.
Well, and first I just love the name Rooted. It's so good.
Thank you.
But what I got the visual of as you were saying that is what your wife did for you do for other people in those spaces is what I imagined to a great degree, in addition to teaching the skills. But I think the word that you just said, permission, is so good for us to be with each other as women in, because of all of this millennia of the discounting, the dismissing, the tuning out of, et cetera. But that permission to have that experience, and I'm going to go back to that same coach. It's so funny because stylistically we're so different. East Coast analytical, totally heady. I'm like an embodied feeler, but it was just such a perfect match for that period of time. But one of the things he would facilitate, because he was an analyst, traditionally trained, so he would facilitate you to come to decisions for yourself, right? And just as you're talking, I'm thinking about the permission giving of so many. So that was one permission that he was like, you don't have to, right? But there was also other things. So I get to know what I know was one of the decisions that I came to through the coaching that I did. And this goes back to your point about gaslighting, which is there are times that my body knows something is horribly off and I have no data. I have no analytical data. I have plenty of body data. I have plenty of body wisdom that tells me this is not right. You aren't right. This situation is not right. I don't feel good over here, et cetera. And situations where people have said that didn't happen. I didn't do that, et cetera. But my whole body knows it did, right? And sometimes we don't have somebody, a witness, a fair witness, who can say, I see you, that happened, which is like the most beautiful gift we can provide for each other, right? So, but in those moments, for me to be fair witness to myself, to say to me, I get to know what I know.
Yes.
I know what I know, even if I can't translate for you, external world, where those data points come from, right? But I think that permission to be, and I'll give another example of this recently, I'm just going through some hard things right now. And I went to a tea. There was a tea and reflection writing journaling workshop. And one of my friends bought us tickets for this event that was just very intimate, very beautiful, so alchemical in many ways. But I had arrived there and one of our friends Like she could see like I had a lot of stuff I was holding. And as soon as she saw me, she's like, breathe, and tried to give me a hug. And I was like, no. And it was interesting because this is like normally, again, as women, we'd be like, oh, they just want you to blah, 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 blah. But what I realized is I was not, no. I get to be mad right now.
Yes.
I get to be irritated. I get to be a mess. I get to be a effing hot mess right now. And I do not need to breathe or look spiritual or levitate because that would make you more comfortable. And that's really what it is. And it's, I've had this a little bit of a bypassing with this person before who, again, we read a lot of the same spirituality things, a lot of the same whatever, but there is this perspective of arrival at which erases my humanity. And I take whole bodily offense to it, right? Now, by the end of that tea and reflection, was I in a calmer space? Sure. Was my face softer, et cetera? But I do not have to, right, show up. So it was the opposite of permission. And I watch myself now. It's not like, oh, that's a bad person that did that to me. All the ways that I have wanted other people to be other ways because of my own discomfort, right? And so I had another friend who was talking to me and she, oh my God, I'm just a hot mess. I'm like, amen. Like you get to just be it, whatever that moment is, what's true for you, right?
Yes.
So I think there's something so powerful about us supporting each other in having the permission to do the experience we came here to do. I get permission to be a human. My daughter made a mistake yesterday. She texted me, she said, I made a mistake, and she apologized to this friend, and she's just in tears about it because she violated her own integrity and she's upset and all the kind of things. And now this person's punishing her and putting it on social media. It's a mess. But what I love is her barometer, her internal sense of lack of alignment. I wish the outside world would go, good job in acknowledging that you erred. You were human. And you got to be human. And wow, double good job that you were able to acknowledge it. And she literally said to me, she's like, this makes it hard to be wanting to admit a mistake again because of what the after effect is of what's happening with this person. And so I just try to hold space for her. But I think, boy, isn't that it? Isn't that just the crux of it, right? She did a human thing. And then we so rarely have the integrity to say, I did a human thing. I'm sorry. And sometimes when we do that, we still get punished for it, right? But I reserve the right for my human experience as much as my spiritual experience.
1,000%. And I think it can be really triggering for other people that haven't owned that they can be all of those things, that like when your daughter took accountability, that holds a mirror to other folks. And when they're not in a place to be able to receive that mirroring, it becomes like, I'm going to break it.
Yes.
I'm going to shatter it because I can't look at that. And that is not a judgment. It's simply a reflection. It's simply I've been there too. And so knowing, when you find yourself wanting to go after someone or wanting to say like, absolutely not, sit back and just ask, get curious. That's one of the biggest things that I teach. I was working with this big company who was working with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and I was working on the mindset. I use the word work so many times there. And we talked about the premise of curiosity when it comes to getting triggered and how that will unleash your power to take accountability more often. And when you are rejected from other folks, again, that is not a reflection of you. You can own that you made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then release everything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really critical piece for us in leadership to be able to own, to be able to receive, so that we can receive feedback. I had someone tell me very recently that they felt that I was very direct and would speak down to them. And I took it hard. I cried and I recognized, I am very direct and I'm not going to change that. But is there a way that I can alter my speech to make people feel more heard, more empowered?
Yeah.
And that required me being able to step back, reflect, like you said, have grace for their experience, but also stand on, I will be direct because we got some things to do. And this is how we get things done, right? And I'm not going to sit there and be who you think a woman should be in their career. But I think it's just powerful to be able to sit back, reflect, and stand in our own autonomy for what we want to create, which brings me to your book. I want us to close with that. You wrote an incredible book that I have had the pleasure of receiving titled Enough. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called Enough, Finding Peace in a World of Distraction, Hustle, and Expectations. And I thought I would write a book at some point in time, but it wasn't what I thought I would do, in those kinds of ways, because it is something that I will say sort of came upon me in those moments. And we might have talked about this in our call before, but I was so busy with that life with no cracks for anything else, like just doing what was supposed to be done next, that there wasn't room for much else to come in. And when I gave notice at that job, there was all of a sudden like cracks in the sidewalk. And again, I think nature has an amazing ability. You'll see all these little plants that grow up no matter what. They might be between two walls of concrete, but just give the littlest crack and life happens, right? And so this book kind of came upon me as I was making that transition. And the primal thing that sort of set it off was when I had found some old chalk from the kids when they were little that was sitting on a shelf, sidewalk chalk, put it in a glass jar that had been in my garage, threw it out on the front sidewalk. And I wrote, please feel free to write, draw, or color. I can't remember, something like that. And I drew a couple colorful circles just to get the ball rolling. And I was still working. So I was sitting at that job, I was still there, and I was on the porch and I was typing on my computer, and I heard a young child and their parent come by. And the young child was like clearly begging the parent, please, can we da-da-da? And you can hear like, I'm a parent. So it's like that whole reluctance. I got a million things to do. My mind's in 10 different places. But the parent eventually gave in, and this little boy was sitting down and he was just like chatting with himself. Oh, a little blue here, a little this, a little that. It was music. It was just beautiful to listen to. And so I didn't want them to know I was there because it felt sacred. It felt like one of those moments where time expands and I'm like, I'm not going to go out there. But I was curious what he had drawn, and they had moved on at some point in time. And I knew that the coast was clear, and I go popping down the steps. And again, being a parent, I figured there was some scribble it reminds me of Le Petit Prince, where it's like looks like an elephant, but it's a snake that swallowed an elephant, whatever it is. And so I popped down there and I literally got stopped in my tracks, and I still get teary thinking about it. He had taken those colorful circles and he had drawn like the rings of Saturn around them. He had turned those little circles into the universe, like into the most beautiful pictures. And I'm somebody who I love those pictures from space because it's art. And it makes me feel like, yes, see, this is not an accidental little thing. And I had a felt sensation in my body at the time where I was stopped. And then all of a sudden I felt this warmth that came like from my belly and my heart and then just wrapped around me. And I think when we go back to the beginning of our conversation, I think that was safe. I think I felt that sense of like peace, wholeness, safety, like in a way that is not my day-to-day normal, and certainly wasn't at that point. And that was the sense of enough. Like it was this, people say enough, like drawing a boundary, that's important too. And I talk about that in the book as well. But this was this real sense of everything's okay. We're okay. I'm okay. All that kind of thing. And so that moment was so profound for me that it just shifted, like it turned on a different trajectory. And I ended up writing that down. I just grabbed it in my journal. But it began the series of a whole bunch of these things happening that I talk about in the book. And it was really like an exploration of all of the sense of both enough, but then contrasting it to not enough. So in the book, enough, she is her own character, and a not enough is his own character. And that voice of not enough, that critical voice, all that kind of thing, like they became to be in contrast with each other in a regular, almost like living in my world kind of way. And so the book is really like my recording of all of those things, but particularly like the lessons I was learning. There's a lesson about comparison. There's a lesson about staying in your energy lane. There's a lesson about paying attention to our body GPS, like a lot of the things we've been talking about, but it was all organic. It all kind of emerged. And then I'll say, once that book was published, I really realized it was the beginning of it teaching me. Like I thought, oh, all this stuff and feels important, I'll gather it. But it was really a gift backwards, because those are the concepts that have now gotten a chance to live in my system in a deeper way since then.
Beautiful. Wow. Everyone, you've got to get her book, Enough. Where can people find you, connect with you, get your book?
Yeah, it's on any of the book websites. So you have to look for Enough by Barbara Burgess, because there's a number of books called Enough. But they can also look at beenough.com. That's all about my book and some information there and a list they can sign up for. Or my main website is corluma.com, corluma.com.
Beautiful. Barbara, if there is one thing you could leave our listeners with today, and I know you've already given them so much, what would you leave them with?
I think it would be trust yourself.
Yeah.
And if I was going to go back, finding things like your rooted groups, find spaces that can help you unlearn, deconstruct, and relearn how to do that because it's not a simple, quick task.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. You guys can find all of those links in the show notes. Check out her book. And I just thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, reflecting, and rising into more of who you really are. If this episode sparked something inside of you or reminded you you're not alone, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. To keep the conversation going, come hang out with me on Instagram @rise2her. I always love hearing what's resonating for you. And if you're craving a space to explore intuitive, soul-led living with others who get it, our community is growing and you're always welcome. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your rhythm, and keep rising.